Hi, I'm Katrina, and this is Boldly Challenging Ableism. I'm your host, Katrina Simons. I'm the Community Program Specialist at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. This program explores various topics that impact people with disabilities in our community. Each episode addresses a different aspect of our society within the context of ableism. Ableism is the prejudice that stems from the belief or belief system that assumes someone is less capable or less worthy because of a real or perceived difference in ability or function. On this program, we hope to answer some questions you may have been afraid to ask, or maybe some you didn't even know you had. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, everybody. For this episode, we talked to Jillian Nelson, Community Resource and Policy Advocate with the Autism Society of Minnesota. I asked our friend Nick Wilke to join me as a co-host. Nick is an independent living coordinator for the Metropolitan Center for Independent Living. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Jillian. Thank you so much for coming today. Can you introduce yourselves to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Jillian Nelson. I'm the Community Resource and Policy Advocate at the Autism Society of Minnesota. I'm also an autistic adult with ADHD and fibromyalgia on top of all that. And really, really passionate about disability rights and changing the outcomes for our entire community.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Jillian, just to kind of start us off here, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your role over at Awesome, and maybe a little bit about being a Humphrey Policy Fellow as well?
So I work for the Autism Society of Minnesota. My official job title is Community Resource and Policy Advocate. This is one of those titles that accounts for wearing a lot of hats working in the nonprofit industry. So during most of the year, I spend a lot of time talking to people, helping them find information and resources about navigating autism in our community, doing some education, doing different trainings, and working with the community as well about autism education. And then I take everything that I hear from our community and all of the struggles and the challenges and the things we'd like to see improved. And January through May, I head off to Capitol Hill and I work with our Minnesota State Legislature to try to make some public policy changes to make a better world for people with disabilities and specifically with autism. This last year, I had the fantastic joy of being a fellow with the Humphrey Policy Fellowship Program with the University of Minnesota, and really just getting to learn a lot more about leadership and public policy outside of the disability bubble. So connecting with amazing leaders all over the state and the country, and just learning a lot more about how to change systems and how to work together across different viewpoints and different ideas and make change and see what other people think and feel and learn how to better use my leadership skills. It was a phenomenal experience. I would 10 out of 10 do it again. I tried to convince them to turn it into a 3-year program while I was in it, and they politely declined and decided to take on another class this year. But I'm sure that class is going to be great too.
Obviously, you would endorse that program for other people.
10 out of 10 would endorse it. I would especially love to see more people from the disability community that want to enter those leadership spaces because it's so important. Like, you're convening with leaders from all over the state that work in all different types of industries. We had people from giant corporations here in Minnesota to people working for other nonprofits, to people working for chambers of commerce, for pharmaceutical companies. Like, we were just so widely represented in that community. And so many of those sectors never really stopped to think about the disability life or what impacts people with disabilities or how to consider inclusion or accessibility. So being able to be a part of that cohort and really bring that perspective to other people was really valuable.
Today, we're talking about disability identity, and identities can be a hard concept for anybody to sort of wrap their head around. Can you tell us a little bit about what identity means to you?
Our community has really, really struggled with disability identity for a long time. And some of the things that we've really pushed forward as a disability community kind of challenge that idea of disability being an identity. Like, for example, we came to a conclusion many years ago that we should use person first language, that people are separate from their disability and we should refer to the person before the disability. I, being an autistic adult, come from a community that many of the members prefer identity first language. So, like, I personally identify as an autistic adult because I can't separate myself from my disability. Like, if someone were to encounter me not in physical form, my disability would still be apparent. Like, you cannot separate it from me because it is part of just the core of how my brain works and how my communication works and how I experience every single thing in the world. So I think disability identity is something that there's been mixed messages within our community because we're supposed to use person first language and separate a person from their disability. But then so many people also still core identify with their disability. And I think it's complicated. For me, I am super proud to be a disabled person. I identify as someone with autism and ADHD and also some mobility challenges due to a chronic pain disorder called fibromyalgia. And I think having those things be a core part of my identity is so important because it gives people so much information about how I experience the world, and how I experience the world shapes who I am as a person.
That is a really good answer to the question. And you actually kind of covered how your specific disability affects the way you see your own identity.
Yeah, I think I've been asked in the past, like, if you could one day wake up and not have autism, would you choose to do that? And I don't think I could, because I have no idea who I would be if I didn't have autism, because it affects so many facets of my personality and the way I engage and the things that interest me and my communication style, that I don't know who I would be if you took away all those things.
So much of what I do is associated with the disability community, and even when I'm not working, I'm still connected in some way or form. So to your point, like, okay, do I take a blue pill and wake up tomorrow? I wouldn't be the same person.
Well, I think too, like, when we started the concept of person first language and this idea of separating people from their disability, it was based on this concept that we needed to see people as people, not people as their disability. But that concept in itself is inherently ableist. If there is a need to separate us from our disability, then you're saying that our disability is something that lessens our worth, and that's why we would need to be separated from it, versus something that is just an inherent part of us that shapes the way that we live our life and experience our world. I'm actually a big proponent. Like, I push really, really hard to stop seeing disability as a collection of diagnoses and to start looking at disability as a culture. And we have all the pieces of a culture. We have our own language, we have our own traditions, we have our own values, we have our own rituals. We are truly a culture, and there's no other culture that we would try to separate a person from. Like, we don't say that someone is a person with Polish descent, or someone is a person with Catholic or with Catholic beliefs. We say, oh, that person's Catholic or that person's Polish. We allow that cultural identity to be the thing that gives us the information and how they experience the world. But with disability, for so long, it was, we need to separate people from this disability so they can be seen as people. But there's nothing shameful about being disabled. There's nothing that lessens our worth or lessens our contributions to the world or lessens our value as a human being by being disabled. So it's a label that I proudly wear.
That's awesome.
So, but I just have one question. So, in a world where we look at disability as a culture instead of a set of diagnoses, how do we then justify and distribute the supports that people need? That has always been my question about that.
Being a culture doesn't change that there's different needs. Like, we look at other cultures, like, let's take the Somali culture for an example. We as a community recognize that people who do not speak English require the support of an interpreter. They require the support of documents that are translated in order to participate in society. It's the same thing. Just because we have a disability doesn't mean that we don't have support needs, and that those support needs still need to be met, and that those accommodations need to be met. And that's been laid out by the law, that if you meet X, Y, and Z, you qualify for services, supports, or accommodations. But it's still, we're more than our medical records. Like, our experience as disabled people is more than what our doctor writes on a form for DHS. It's lived experience. And I actually think that if we stop looking at disability as a collection of medical information, and we start looking at disability as a culture, that we're actually going to improve the outcomes that we see with disability services and supports. Because right now, so many of the disability supports and services that are out there are based on the medical model. And it assumes it assumes that everything is a medical interaction, and it creates unnecessary power dynamics. If we look at disability services as something that we need to deliver in a culturally appropriate way, we're going to have a better outcome for people that are receiving those services, and we're going to see a lot less medical trauma, a lot less trauma in general, and a lot more inclusion and community integration.
Have you ever had a conversation with somebody who views disability identity as completely different from how you view it? And how did that end up playing out?
Absolutely. In my line of work, I talk to a lot of people. I talk to parents, family members, individuals on the spectrum or with other disabilities. A lot of times when someone is newly diagnosed, that level of acceptance and pride isn't quite there. I recognize that this is a journey for people, and I let them know that. I think it's one of the reasons that I do live my life so openly autistic and disabled, is because I want to be a person that can be a role model to say, hey, this isn't the end of the world. This is okay. Who you are as a person has value. And no matter how hard things have been prior to getting a diagnosis, like, you bring great things to the world, and you just have to learn how to live in this world that wasn't made for us on your own terms.
That's fabulous. I'm going to shift gears a little bit back to something that you were talking about. Can you tell our listeners why your activism and focus is perfect for you?
I have a really, really great privilege that I get to be a part of the community I represent. So I'm up on Capitol Hill, and I'm advocating for the autism community and the disability community. But like, I have that lived experience as well. I have that privilege of being almost a shepherd for our community and helping people find resources and information. I like to think of myself as a story keeper. Like, people call me and they tell me the hard things. And then I realize that I'm hearing the same hard story over and over and over, and I come up with a solution. Like, this, if we change this in our system, this wouldn't be happening to people. Or if we did this, maybe this would be prevented. And I get to be there, and I get to tell people. And I also get to be like real lived experience. So I'm not up there telling someone else's story on the Hill. I'm not up there representing another community. Like, this is like, I got a horse in the race. Like, this is my life as well as everyone else's life. And I think that's a really unique perspective, because too often in politics and public policy, we have a lot of professional people with a lot of fancy degrees that are advocating for us and that are deciding what's best for us or what our community needs, or that are in those rooms making the compromises at the final hours. But I'm the person who lives the life. So when I'm in a meeting deciding, like, what are we willing to compromise on this bill regarding waiver 2.0? Like, I'm the person in the room that has a waiver, not the person who has a child with a waiver, but the person who literally depends on their own waiver for their stability that allows them to go to work. When we're talking about accessibility, like, those accessibility things are going to directly impact myself. And that's a lot to carry. And it's a huge privilege to be able to take my whole community with me, and to be able to really, really make sure that what we're pursuing on the Hill isn't really good in theory, but it actually has that lived experience connected to it.
And Jillian, you've lived with autism and ADHD. I'm sorry. Are you comfortable sharing with us how long you've lived with autism and ADHD and that part of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 6 years old. So that's been most of my life. But my autism diagnosis didn't come until about 21 years ago. I was 21 myself, and I have a little brother, and he was just entering the school system, and they kind of identified some autism there. And he saw a doctor that had seen me for everything but autism when I was a kid. And the doctor remembered me and my mom and had suggested that maybe this was something that was going on with me as well, and that we had missed because we didn't know as much about autism in the 80s as we do now.
And we miss it in girls often.
Yeah, and I'm a girl. So he suggested that I go get assessed as an adult. And sure enough, it explained literally everything. And actually, at the time that I was diagnosed, I was actually a homeless drug addict, because I was completely lost. I had no idea what I was doing in my life. I couldn't seem to get anything right. And I was just really, really struggling. And having that diagnosis suddenly made everything in the world make sense. And it was kind of the pinnacle of really turning my life around and getting on a better path and slowly starting the career that I have now.
And then the fibromyalgia came later. Is that correct?
That was about 2 years ago, yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between having a invisible disability versus a visible disability, or even how those two have interacted for you?
We see a lot of crossover in the autism community, even without research, of autoimmune disorders and people, especially women with autism. I also have some hypermobility challenges as well that really play into the fibromyalgia. Um, and I spent a lot of years just struggling with pain, thinking, okay, well, this is because I have a bad back, or because I had a back injury when I was this old, or that. And I really didn't have the concept that this wasn't how everyone lived. So that was probably because of autism. I didn't realize that this wasn't a normal thing until I started talking to other people and realizing that, like, other people don't hurt all the time, or other people don't have mysterious nerve pain that pops up. And then the hypermobility in my joints started to get a little bit more severe. So I started seeking out answers. For me, biggest the biggest difference, after having a diagnosis and putting some stuff in place, was just how the world views me. It's still not perfect, but like if I'm somewhere on my scooter and I ask for accessibility, nobody questions it. Like, there's a mobility device. Obviously, I need accessibility. If I'm somewhere not on my scooter and I request some sort of accessibility related to my autism, I usually have to fight for it, or I'm usually just denied it. I often tell the story of during the pandemic when they reopened the gyms and they had all these regulations, which I was on the group of people that wrote the regulations regarding PCAs for the governor's office. I returned back to the gym with my PCA, and I was actually taken out of the pool and told that I couldn't have my PCA there with me. A good friend of mine also belonged to this gym and had been there 20 minutes before me in the time slot right before mine for the pool with her PCA as well, but she uses a wheelchair. Nobody questioned her PCA being with her. Same gym, same day, same staff, wildly different experiences. And like I ended up like fighting it for like 13 weeks and never got to anything that was considered accessible for me to have my staff with me. And the reality is my staff goes to the gym with me because I do really poorly with transitioning. So if I am at the gym by myself, I may very well be in the locker room trying to transition for like a good solid hour. So during a pandemic, it is the best case scenario to have a PCA with me that's going to get me out of the locker room in 10 minutes versus me just kind of meandering through my day. Um, so like those are the type of experiences I was used to before. Um, there is still like I notice that there is still a lot of social issues related to being a person with a larger body shape that uses a mobility device. Most people often assume that it's because I'm lazy or that I can't walk because of my size versus, hey, if I walk around for 2 hours, I'm going to dislocate my hip joint. Very different issues of like, this is hard versus I'm going to injure myself.
Well, and then you get to the point of like when you're walking around at the hill, marble floors look great, but they're not very forgiving at all.
They're usually waxed.
Right.
Yeah, but they're real fun when you're in a motorized device.
Oh, yes.
You can just fly across those marble floors.
No problem. Jillian, what do you think? What do you think the biggest thing is that people learn as we begin to talk about disability identity?
Like, what's the biggest message you want to put out if you could only put out one?
I want people to know that being disabled doesn't decrease your value. In fact, I would say being disabled increases your value. Other people don't plan life the way disabled people have to plan. You don't have to figure out whether or not you can get in and out of a building. You don't have to plan sensory things. You don't have to be innovative in your daily life if you're just living a typical non-disabled life. People with disabilities have so much value to bring to this world, so much creativity, so much innovation. I was actually just talking to someone from a park board right before this, and I told them that we should really just stop doing focus groups with non-disabled people for things like community planning or walkability. If you just bring together a group of diverse disabled people with all different types of disabilities and we tell you what we would need to be accessible, the entire world is going to benefit. Like, no non-disabled person ever came into a building and shook their fist and said, this place is too accessible, and this ramp and this wide doorway and this accessible sensory friendly lighting is just ruining my life. Like, that's never happened. When we plan an accessible world, everyone benefits. And when we embrace our identity as disabled people and we bring that lived experience and we bring those needs to the table and we humanize the disability experience for everyone else, we're only going to improve the diversity and inclusion and the color of this unique and amazing community we're building here in this state, in this country, in our city. Like, we have so much to add to our communities if we're willing to live our lives authentically and honestly.
That echoes a statement that I think I heard it 20 years ago, but disability is the one population we all become more of tomorrow.
Yep, we have open enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow.
100% open enrollment. If you live long enough, you're going to join us. If you're unlucky in how you drive your car, you might join us.
Right.
Anyone can become one of us.
And here we are waiting for you.
Or anyone's child could
Right.
become one. Like, you could have a child with a disability.
I don't understand on the Hill when people are so opposed to disability spending, because I want to look at people and just be like, all you're doing is like writing a check for your future insurance. Like, if you become one of us, you're going to be really thankful that you made these investments ahead of time rather than having to join us in the fight for them.
Oftentimes, it's people blame fiscal responsibility as a reason for not accommodating people with disabilities or not spending more money to accommodate people with disabilities. And if you look at it as an investment in your own future, well, then it is fiscally responsible. So there you go.
And if we do accommodate people with disabilities, then we can be in the community and we become taxpayers and we contribute to society and capitalism, which capitalism, but like, we have the potential to do so much more if the world was more accessible.
That's great.
Jillian, did you have anything else that you want to add to your already amazing level of content you've given us today?
Yeah. Or plug. Do you want to plug anything?
I just want to encourage people with disabilities that might still be struggling with that identity. Like, you never know who it's going to impact. There's younger generations coming up behind us all the time. And if we live our life proudly, we have the chance to change what their future looks like. So many of us have experienced trauma or discrimination or have had to fight twice as hard. we can change that outcome for our younger generations. We can teach them to accept themselves from the time that they're very young. We can teach the world that we're living in to accept them when they become adults. Like, we have the propensity to change the future for all the tiny versions of us that came before us. And when you think about it that way, the idea of accepting ourselves and embracing this identity, it seems like a really powerful movement when you realize that it has the propensity to change the future for an entire generation.
Well, we are so glad you came on today, Jillian. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Everything you're doing is perfect for you and also wonderful for our community.
It was a pleasure to be here with all of you. And if any of you see me up on Capitol Hill, stop me and say hi.
We for sure will.
We want to thank our listeners. We'll talk to you all real soon.
Bye.
See you later.
Boldly Challenging Ableism is a co-production of AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. For more information, please visit ici.umn.edu.